Hope you are all well and ready for this show. Democracy dies in the darkness and censorship. What exactly does that mean to you? What does it mean considering what happened yesterday? Again, we at MegaMedia.org denounce all forms of violence. Unlike the summer when the violence was occurring, people celebrated the violence. They said that, hey, they're not being heard, they're angry, they've got to get the frustration out. They were burning down buildings, burning down neighborhoods, burning down police departments, burning down, taking over federal buildings with spray paint, creating these little self-communities. I don't think the police killed anyone. Some were arrested, but of course, the Democrats set up funds, GoFundMe pages to get them out. Kamala Harris, the now vice president-elect, even tweeted about it on social media. Give to this organization to help these soldiers get out of jail. David Dorn, a police officer, was killed. And there were other police officers who happened to be Black that were killed during the summer and spring of violence. Toppling statues. And we were told, this is good, sit back, don't say anything. We were told that by the media. They were saying, nothing to see here. On one media station, they said that who said that protests had to be calm and couldn't be, full of violence and whatnot, that they were peaceful. Fast forward to yesterday, January 6th, what took place on the Capitol. Some are blaming the president. They said, oh, well, he incited this. He told them to go down to the White House. Yes, he did, but he didn't say go to the Capitol, storm the Capitol, tear it down. Now you have Republicans who are saying, oh, naughty, naughty, Mr. President. Got a lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives, or people who said they supported the president. Oh, naughty, naughty, Mr. President. Are these real Trump supporters? And not just Trump supporters, are they supporters of democracy? When the going got tough, they decided to cut and run. Again, we denounce all forms of violence. But when people aren't heard, and their thoughts and their feelings are just dismissed, it becomes a tinderbox, a fuel. Strike a match, and it explodes. A woman was killed yesterday. I'm told that 3 other people died. The woman who was killed was white, not Black. Well, some say, well, she was trespassing. Okay, but she was unarmed, going into the Capitol through a window. She was shot dead by a police officer who happens to be Black. But people are saying, oh, so what? She was breaking law. Look the other way. Okay, fair enough. But if the tables were turned and she were Black, and the officer white, people would be in the streets right now protesting. But she was white. She was killed by a police officer? Or do we? Democracy dies in the dark and censorship. So now let's censor the president. Let's censor all of his followers because we don't want to hear what they have to say. And people laugh about it and say, so what? Oh, who cares? Today it's the president. Tomorrow it could be you. And you say, oh, no, not me. I'm not in politics. You're right. But there could be something else that they're censoring that they don't want you to know about. Some other form of democracy. What are other countries saying about us? They're looking at us and they're laughing. Who cares if they're laughing? We're trying to get it right also. We're a young nation. And furthermore, who's to say that our form of democracy is for those countries. Who's to say that they want this democracy? And for those on the left who are always saying the United States is not so good, it should fall down. So what are you bitching about now when you see this is happening on the Capitol? Why are you saying, oh, we're so above that? I thought that we weren't above that. It's also confusing. If you stop and listen and stop being played by the media, stop allowing them to change what you're thinking and just say, wait a minute, I can think for myself. I'm going to free my democracy and my thoughts. That's my opening statement. Glad you could join us. I will now bring on my host at Small Town Andrew and our guest, Heather Robinson. How's it going, guys?
Great.
Going good. So tell me, what did you think about my opening?
Brilliant as ever, and so honest and unafraid of cutting through the Orwellian doublespeak to the realities, the double standard. Listen, we know that multiple wrongs don't make a right, but the way you laid out, Rob, of course we know it, but I hadn't really thought about it. I mean, of course I thought about it, but in terms of all the destruction of the summer, specifically with regard to government entities, police departments burned, federal buildings trashed, black police officers killed, and police officers in general under siege. We were told to stand down. We were told that this was all, I think at one point a commentator said, fiery, but mostly peaceful while a building burned. I don't remember if it was a federal building, and look, I'm not defending what happened yesterday. As you guys know, I was embarrassed. I was aggrieved about it, but there's a double standard, a big one, and we know it. And you explained it well. Right.
Andrew, what do you say?
You guys know how I feel about yesterday. I was thrilled with it, to be honest, but very disappointed in the violence that took place, the little bit of violence, because mostly it just broken windows. Very unfortunate, a couple of people passed away. But democracy and freedom is not always pretty. It can be nasty, but sometimes things are necessary. I wrote an article for MegaMedia today about 100 years from now, people will look back at yesterday. They will see all the people in red, white, and blue with the American flags waving them. They will be curious, what made these people so mad? And then they will investigate the election fraud. So yesterday was a huge day in American history, and I think it's going to transcend for a long time.
Yeah, something that you said, Andrew, that I think that we have to remember, and I've been alluding to it on all of our shows, is that democracy isn't clean. It's not pretty. Once you get there, you want to make it nice and perfect, but you're always striving to make it better. But what we have to remember is that our nation was founded on these types of fights and inner bickering and whatnot. And some people will say, yeah, but we take our differences to the polls and we vote. Yes, we do that, but we also fight for them. And we fight for other countries so that they can have the same democracy. And then we sit back and we say, well, look at Iran. If they want the democracy, the people have got to rise up against the government. Now, we're saying that their government is wrong based upon what? Well, because they hate us. Well, what are we doing so that they would hate us? Perhaps if we stayed out of foreign affairs, as George Washington cautioned us when he was leaving office, a lot of this wouldn't be happening. But still, we want people to taste our democracy. Democracy isn't pretty, and it's ugly, and sometimes it seems contradictory. But this is who we are. Now, going back to the run in the summer, a lot of that, I think, was misguided over a person being killed. What happened to George Floyd should not have happened, okay? But the way it was spent by the media, some of the things they were saying just wasn't true. The same thing happened with Michael Brown. When Barack Obama was the president, we endured summers of this type of turmoil and violence. And people were saying, oh, well, black people were killed. No, the police didn't kill those rioters. They allowed them to go out and they allowed them to burn down buildings. The mayors even said, give them space to release their frustration. So when I hear, well, there's a double standard. No, there isn't a double standard. You can say there's a double standard now if you like to say so. but they gave them the right to fight, to tear up stuff. Okay? So I don't want to hear Joy Reid say, or even the president-elect, Joe Biden came out and said, well, we all know if this was BLM, this would have been a different situation. Pandering to Black people. Black Lives Matter couldn't give two shits, excuse me, about Black lives, because if they did, they would be in Chicago rooting out the violence in Chicago. We've got to look at this. Yes, it's ugly. And yes, these are the things that we don't want to say. Okay, no one should ever lose their life. What happened to the woman in DC should not have happened. Okay, yeah, she should not have entered the building, but an unarmed white woman was killed. Is her family going to go out and protest and burn down the neighborhoods? I hardly think so. But then when you hear people saying, well, if they were Black, they would be jailed and people would be dying. A white woman was killed. What don't you guys get? What don't you get that this summer, Black Lives Matter burned part of St. John's Church? What don't you get when you thought that the president was going to use tear gas? You guys rode him and said he better not. That's wrong. What don't you get when he said that he was going to call out the army? A lot of people were saying within his own administration, he can't dare do that. So we got to stop and take a deep breath and realize that we're being manipulated by the media. Because if the media told the truth, all would be saying a woman lost her life fighting for something that she believed in, whether we believe in it or not. And it is unfortunate. If the media were to spin the story correctly or to report the story correctly, they would say this summer, people were angry and upset because what happened to George Floyd. We were told this, but this is actually what happened, as opposed to saying the police hate Black people, getting these feelings all stirred up. Democracy dies in the darkness and censorship when the truth is unable to be freed, so that even like-minded people, even-minded people can understand what actually happened. Thank you. Guys, go ahead.
Yeah, well said, Rob. I completely agree with everything. And I'd like to make clear that obviously I do not endorse many of the violent acts, the breaking windows or anything like that. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, I think this is going to be an incident that's overblown. Unfortunately, a couple people apparently did lose their life. It's very tragic. And obviously all of us wish that never happened.
Right.
But like we've been hearing for weeks, people say we are not going to take a fraudulent election. Patriots will not stand for all this fraud. Well, we didn't stand for it. They stormed the House. They occupied the Capitol, and it made history.
Yeah, you know what I
take.
Right. What I don't understand is when you look at this and you see what happened. Mayor Bowser had said that weekend, I think it was January 3rd, that she had already reached out to the National Guard. She was going to mobilize them. And she also gave, I guess, I don't know, restrictions or orders or whatnot as to how people that were coming to the White House should conduct themselves. No guns, no this, no that. You know, stores were going to be limited, so you got to bring your own food. You wouldn't be able to leave the perimeter to use the bathroom, and all this stuff. But when it came down to it, it seemed as if though she was completely either unprepared or she wanted this to happen. And then too, we got to look at people with the police. Well, they defunded the police, so the police much. So do we really fund the police when we see that things like this could happen? And it'll happen again.
Yeah,
and again and again.
We're not hearing defund the police all of a sudden, are we? And
right.
Not when it's people on the conservative side who are being disorderly. Suddenly we're hearing about law and order and the importance of law and order. And I agree, as you guys know, I'm very strong on this. And, you know, I understand, and speaking with you guys yesterday gave me a little more depth in terms of understanding some of the thought behind this idea. However, I do feel it was ill-advised. I think it was a shame for multiple reasons that people on our side actually breached the Capitol building. Look, I think that the intent was whatever it was. There was a lot of good intent, but let's face it, any group of people can turn into a mob.
Right.
And it's not about color. It's not about politics. It's not about, whatever. I mean, it's unfortunately some of the lower side of human nature takes over. And personally, I have always believed that I'm not a believer. Anytime there's a mob situation going on, I exit myself pretty fast. And to be honest, I kind of think of that as, I tend to associate that more with a conservative mindset. So I was very surprised to see our side descend that way. But it's just a reminder that we're all human. It's not that there's one group that's inherently better than anybody else. This is a thing that can happen. And this is why we need, one of the many reasons we need a working police force. And yes, it's very interesting to hear all these people who were making excuses for lawlessness all summer long, suddenly completely change their tunes.
Yep.
And I think it's patent hypocrisy. It's ridiculous. And yes, I think that we need to think about the future and about how we will move forward. Now, I think a lot of folks on our side have, tremendous dashed expectations, dashed hopes, a lot of crushing disappointment, and things came together in a way that, unfortunately, I don't think was positive, and I don't think will be remembered positively, which is really a shame because, as we know, there's so much that's important in this movement and in, the wins that our president has had. We want to honor that. And I was very proud of him today. I think that he made a good statement. And, he's trying to definitely be the bigger person. And I don't personally believe he wanted violence or that he incited violence.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I listened to his statement. And unless I'm missing something, and maybe I am, I'm open to hearing. I didn't hear him tell anybody bust into the Capitol and, let them have it. And I didn't hear anything. I heard him say, let's march to the Capitol.
Right.
I wrote it down. We are going to walk down to the Capitol. We are going to cheer on our senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them. That was the statement I heard, which did not sound like anything like violently take over the Capitol building. Did you hear him say anything like that?
No. I didn't at all. Go ahead, Andrew.
I was just going to say, my take is getting elections stolen is worse than being under attack from a foreign country. We are under attack from our own country right now. As I said earlier, democracy and freedom can be ugly, but we had to stand up for ourselves because no one else was going to do it. The fake news media wasn't going to talk about the election fraud. They were just going to delete it from history. It was going to be a footnote, and so was President Trump. Now they will be forced to show the pictures of yesterday, all the hundreds of thousands of American patriots surrounding the Capitol. And people will look into that, why these patriots were so mad, and it will lead to people investigating the election fraud for generations to come.
Right, you're right, Andrew. And just to add on to that is that the people, as Heather said, yes, the president did say we will march to the Capitol. When I heard that, I wasn't thinking he was saying or implying we're going to storm it. Now, it is unfortunate. There were a few bad apples, as is always the case, when you have a group of people. And just from hearing different reports, people were saying that there were different little fractions that were saying, hey, they're going to break into the Capitol. Let's go. And when you hear something like that, of course, you'll have other people who are already wild, and then they're going to jump in on it. But there were people who were patriots who did not anticipate doing that. Yes, they anticipated marching outside the Capitol and saying, hey, don't steal, don't steal. But to breach the perimeters? No. And how did it get to that again? What was the mayor thinking? And we can't let her off.
I don't think they were at that moment. Forgive me for interrupting, but I mean, I don't think that it was, again, I think it became, look, I mean, we have to be honest about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, there were images I saw of people who were shoving, pushing each other, pushing through the windows, smashing windows. Listen, I love our, movement, and I'm with you. Right, I hear you guys, and I know it's true. Look, the media has spun this horribly. It's a complicated situation as far as the election and all the shysting that no doubt went on from the Democratic side. I don't doubt it, in many states, and et cetera. But now I'm just talking about what happened yesterday, and I understand I'm not trying to divorce it from the whole, but I think we have to understand that our side, I mean, our people, any group of people a mob hysteria can take over. And I think that's what started to happen. And I don't think that's going to, that's not going to enhance, it's not going to read well, for posterity. I think what we need to do now to really to restore our credibility and to keep the focus on something constructive is to continue to, I think we're all along this idea of promoting a real review of what went on and transparency and all of that. I think if it hadn't been for those unfortunate, bad actors, I think if everybody had gone there and had a peaceful, however many thousand man and woman strong candlelight demonstration,
it wouldn't have done anything. We've already had three of them, and it did absolutely nothing.
But it would have been better than what happened.
No, because this marked our movement in history as a movement unlike anything we have ever seen before.
It's a lot like a lot of things that we've seen before.
We've never seen the Capitol stormed from angry Americans that were angry at the people inside.
Right. Well, we've seen a lot of revolutions, and a lot of times they don't end well. And
right. If this was the worst, if this was the worst of the revolution, where only maybe 2 or 3 people died, then we got off easy in my book.
But we didn't win, okay, because Biden will be inaugurated. 2, I mean, let's just talk reality, okay. It didn't prompt anybody in the middle to be more sympathetic to our concerns about the fraud. Right. And I don't think it's going to I don't think it worked. I mean, I think unfortunately it didn't. I mean, there were elements of it that were quite ugly, and that I don't think that we should be condoning or encouraging. And, a woman who probably cared very deeply about everything we care about, sadly, she didn't deserve to die. I agree with Rob. I think she was, maybe did something that wasn't so sensible, but she got herself killed. I mean, it's terrible. It's a horrible thing. And I don't think it's what the president wanted, and I don't think it helped him, and I don't think it helped the cause. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to argue with you, but.
Well, I don't think you should be sorry for what you're saying. I mean, that's your beliefs, those are your thoughts. But I think that, again, taking a step back, because I think we're all saying the same thing here. You're saying that what happened is it didn't further the cause, and, no one will listen. Well, see, that's just the problem. That is the reason why the people stormed the Capitol. And again, these people got caught up in the moment. Okay, there were people who went there just to hear the president and to march outside the Capitol. But then, as it is with any large group of people, when someone starts to breach the area and say, hey, we're going to go through, other people start running too, thinking, excited, oh, well, let's do this. I can't believe this happened. And again, my question is, how were they able to reach the peripheral of the Capitol? We know that last weekend, the mayor said that she was going to mobilize the National Guard. Now, here's the other thing, going back to what you were saying. No, it doesn't look good, okay? But at the same time, this is the reason why the people went there, because they weren't being heard. I'm not saying that the violence was good, but they weren't being heard. Okay, and when people aren't being heard, what do they do? Look at what happened. Look at what happened this summer. People felt that they weren't being heard.
Right. Of course, the double standard is absolutely there. You're right. I mean, we were told that because the people this summer had tremendous grief and frustration and feelings that they were justified in being violent, and I didn't buy it then, and I don't.
Right.
Sorry, I don't buy this either. I get that, this idea that there are these huge forces arrayed against us, and government, the Democrats, the media, big tech, suppression of the truth around the fraud. I get that if one has that set of views, and I'm open to a lot of what you guys are saying. I don't know the whole truth, but I mean, maybe that is all absolutely. It's very hard to swallow this and just say.
But
I hear you guys. I do hear you.
But this is what democracy is. It's not pretty, okay, and it's ugly. And again, we'll constantly say this, that we're not saying that the violence, that we, glorify the violence, that it's acceptable, because it wasn't acceptable. But when people aren't being heard, what happened today? You had the Speaker of the House saying, oh, well, we should evoke the 25th Amendment. Oh, we should do this once again. It's like, but are you listening to us? The New York Times, the president incites violence. Okay, well, what if another paper were to say that Joe Biden was pandering to blacks by saying, well, if BLM had done this. Now, BLM, they're already mad at him because they feel as though he's not being progressive enough. But people aren't going to pay attention to that. They're going to allow what happened yesterday to rule the day. They want to use that to spin it and forget about everything else. So when I see people who are out there who are saying, oh, well, no, he was wrong, he was this and he was that, and da, 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 I'm like, okay, just stop and take stock of what you're saying. Listen to what you're saying and where you're getting your talking points. Because if somewhere else were out there spinning these things and saying something different, you would be on board with that.
Sure.
Okay, so it makes, to me, in my opinion, it's ridiculous for anyone to start entertaining, okay, we should evoke the 25th Amendment. We only have 13 more days before the president leaves. Okay, so let's say we were to do it.
It's terrible.
Say, okay, we've got to build in more time because we've got to get the votes. We've got to get all the preparation. Look at what happened with the last impeachment. And if that were to happen, if it were to delay the inauguration, then what will people say? Oh, Trump, he's doing it again. He's doing it again. So they're saying this, they're putting everything out there because it's not just about Trump leaving office. It is, we want to silence him indefinitely. And when they're doing that, they're trying to silence the 74 million people that voted for him.
I know.
And it's not just that, because it's so greater. And I think people need to look at this. It's so much more, and it's bigger than Trump. It's bigger than the 74 million people that voted for him. This will affect everything that we do. And when you have big tech that are going and censoring what we're hearing and what we're not hearing, putting on filters.
Yeah.
But when something does happen in the country, and God forbid, our elected leaders say, well, we don't want the people to know about it, so we want to suppress it, and then we don't know about it. Mm-hmm. Who do we have to blame? No one but ourselves, because we see it right here, right now, and it's happening. Whether you like Trump or you don't like him. What's happening right now should not be happening. Information should not be suppressed. The senators that were on the Hill, when they stepped up and they said, and in view of what happened earlier, I'm not going to contest the certification of the votes from Arizona. Why did they say that? Out of fear that they too, a crowd might come and storm them. Some could say the same thing for the Supreme Court. A lot of judges decided not to hear the cases. Well, in my opinion, the judges shouldn't hear the case because it's not for the judges, it's for the legislatures. And all the different state constitutions say that. So when people say, oh, well, the judges, they said this, I don't care what they're saying. I don't want the judges to make a decision. It is for the state legislatures. And even if there wasn't going to be a win, or they were not going to come down in the president's favor, still that was their constitutional duty to hear it. But when you're dismissive out of fear that a mob might come to your doorstep and you base your decisions upon that, it's just simply not right. And people get angry.
Sure, and we've dealt with the mob. I mean, conservatives have been on the receiving end of the mob all summer long and all year long, and so
Right.
it's particularly galling to be sanctimoniously lectured by anybody, including these so-called liberals, about this mob yesterday. I understand how you guys feel. More than you realize I do. It's nauseating because it's like now suddenly we're being told we're so unethical, and our people who are there because of what they believe is their basic rights, they're being lectured to. However, I don't mean to keep repeating myself. It is a terrible double standard. However, multiple wrongs don't make a right.
Right.
And I do think that what you said is very interesting, Rob. When you said the whole bit about incitement. I mean, this is why a lot of people don't trust the media. I'm with you guys. I mean, I did not hear Trump incite that. What happened yesterday? I'm happy to listen if somebody wants to play a tape for me. I looked around on Google today. I did not hear him say anything like, let's go get them, let's beat them up, let's break into the Capitol. I didn't hear that. Meanwhile, the Washington Post headline, there was an article I read, the lead was after Trump incited a riot, a violent riot on the Capitol building. I'm not defending what happened, but I see no evidence, we're talking about evidence, that Trump directly incited or indirectly. I'm missing. So I mean, the point is, all of this spin and all of this is, I think, is very much the real. But by voicing our frustration this way, by communicating, by talking, writing,
Right.
lobbying, that's what we got to do more of. And I don't know, whatever else other ideas anybody has, I don't think violence is going to get us anywhere or is the right path.
No, it's not. It's not going to get us anywhere. As we said, we don't condone the violence at all. Joining us also is attorney Manny Alicandro. Thank you for coming on. And we've just been having an open discussion as to what has transpired, the past 2 days, what got us to this point, the censorship, and what exactly people were expecting, what was going to happen, and what wasn't going to happen. And one of the things that I've been saying is that I keep hearing in the media that people thought that Mike Pence was going to make a decision to overturn the election. And that wasn't I didn't feel that, well, I wasn't looking for him to do that. But what I was looking for him to do was to say, hey, we're going to look into the questions that have been raised from the different states, Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. And for 10 days, we're going to investigate to see what happened. Now, of course, within 10 days, only so much could take place. But that was one of the things that Ted Cruz had wanted. But then after the breach of the Capitol, a lot of senators just didn't have the stomach to move forward and just said, hey, we're just going to let what happened happen. And to me, again, you're silencing the voices. You're not listening to those 74 million people. Yes, some of them felt that Trump was going to be president had they got this opportunity. But my whole thing was, let's listen to let's get the evidence out there. Let's listen and let it take us wherever it took us. What do you say, Manny?
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Just a couple of things, right? So, look, this election was problematic on many different levels, right? There was, based upon different estimates, 100 million of paper ballots, people voting by mail, which is unprecedented, right? The Democrats predominantly put in legislation or not in their states where you get into questions of constitutionality with regard to universal mail-in voting, in particular, let's say Pennsylvania. Extremely problematic how they affected that. But more people voted by mail than ever, which created a lot of opportunity for people voting twice, potentially, votes coming in late being counted, ballots that were not filled out correctly being counted, ballots where there was no signature verification being counted, and all that. Okay, extremely problematic. My biggest issue, I volunteered for Lawyers for Trump for a week in Philadelphia for the Trump campaign. The biggest problem I have is the fact that people don't understand that there are specific venues and forums to complain, to state your cause of action. And those are the courts. Those are the only areas that I'm available, that I'm aware of that are available as a lawyer, that if you have an issue, for example, if you're alleging fraud, you file a case in a Pennsylvania court if you're alleging that there's fraud in Pennsylvania. Now, I know specifically 2 times Rudy Giuliani, respectfully, was asked by 2 federal court judges. They were both Republican. Counselor, are you alleging claiming fraud? And Rudy said no, twice. But all I hear from Trump and all I hear from everybody else is fraud, 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 fraud. Fraud has specific elements and indicia to be proven in a court of law. You don't need to convince me if there was fraud. You don't need to kill on Twitter. You need to prove your case in court.
Right.
We did not do that. We struck out 60 times. There were over 60 cases filed ineffectively. Now, if we don't have standing, that's legal malpractice. Lawyers should not bring forth a case where you don't have standing. Litigation involves segmentation. The reason that you have discovery and you introduce evidence at the end of the case or towards the end of the case, it's backloaded because it's a very expensive, arduous, painful process, burdensome process on the litigants and the court. So if you don't have a real case and the case is dismissed, you're never going to get to the point of discovery and introducing your evidence. That doesn't depend upon the opinion of a judge. If you have a bad case, you got a bad case. You go after your lawyers for malpractice. We had bad cases. Let me give you an example. You have universal mail-in voting in Pennsylvania. It needs to be done in accordance with the Pennsylvania state constitution, right? It was not done in accordance with the Pennsylvania state constitution. We know that. You have to vote in Pennsylvania in person, except there are certain exceptions. They did this quick drive-by with the governor and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which is clearly unconstitutional. But guess what? Guess when we, the Trump campaign and others, brought these cases after Election Day. And you know what we asked the court to do? We said, this is unconstitutional, Your Honors. Discard 2.1 million votes. So people voted in good faith, filled out a ballot. They had no idea, could be a retiree, could be whomever, whether it's constitutional or not. So no judge is going to say, yeah, you know, you're right, it's unconstitutional, counselor. I'm going to throw away 2.1 million votes. Preposterous that we would even ask for that nonsense. Okay. But if we brought that case earlier in the year, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania or the U.S. Supreme Court or a federal court in Pennsylvania would have punted that back to the state legislature to come up with something else. The problem is when you bring these cases too late, you don't give the court the opportunity to make to figure out a solution, to make a reasonable, practical solution. And you run out of time. The cases were all brought late. The relief sought was preposterous and ridiculous. So we lost all those cases badly, embarrassing. Some terms like were used, like Frankenstein by judges. You're a lawyer. You don't want a judge to say you pulled like a Frankenstein maneuver trying to slap together a case. Not a good description. Just because you say it so doesn't mean it's so. Was a lot of comments that Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell got with this kind of tinfoil hat stuff about Dominion and Smartmatic that everybody seems to believe, but can't be proven in any way in any forum that could do something about it. Okay, so then we moved to the legislatures, and that didn't work out. Right? That was a dog or pony show, and we went through the whole thing with figuring out what's going on with the legislatures and testimony and whatever, and that was kind of got us nowhere. Then we came up with this last ditch effort of January 6th, and something magical special was going to happen, that Mike Pence was going to sprinkle pixie dust on some of these electoral votes from these questionable states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, right? Wisconsin, and miraculously, he was either going to flip those votes from Biden to Trump or not count those votes for Biden, none of which was in the realm of possibility. That's not just coming from me. That's coming from constitutional lawyers who, are well versed in this stuff, well beyond me. Okay. There was never, ever the possibility that either Congress or Vice President Pence, who's the president pro tem of the Senate, ever had the constitutional authority to overturn or do anything with those votes except count them. The authority under the Constitution, under Article 2, with regard to election law, is expressly delegated to the states. Congress is federal. The federal government cannot supersede what happened in the states. For some reason, the message was contrived. Many people were misled. Many people went to DC yesterday expecting exactly that to happen. We're going to bum rush the Capitol and put Mike Pence in a headlock and give him noogies until, he flips Pennsylvania for Trump. None of that was ever going to happen.
Right.
Trump is speaking and saying, I really hope Pence does the right thing, because if he doesn't, I'm going to be pissed off at him. At that same time, Pence issues via tweet a letter that's like 3 pages that clearly was all lawyered up, that said, look, I don't have the authority under the Constitution to do anything but to count votes, the electoral votes. So we were all set up and misled. Who were we misled by? We were misled by Trump. We were misled by Sidney Powell. We were misled by Lynn Wood. All these people, Jenna Ellis, they kept giving us this false hope and belief that something could have been done, and it never could have been done. Marco Rubio, not defending Marco Rubio, he put out a tweet today where he actually said, I'm going to read the tweet. Let me pull it up because it's a really good tweet. And I know we don't like Marco Rubio, but we got to give him credit where credit is due. Marco Rubio said, some misled you that the VP could reject ballots, that objections could pass or be used as leverage to force an audit. They knew the truth, but thought it was a great way to get attention and raise money. So what did it become? It became, are you with Trump or against Trump? Mm-hmm. So you had Josh Hawley, who's a patriot, who's a good guy. He came out of the gate, I'm going to object. Then all these other people started to join, Ted Cruz and the rest. And, they know and they knew that all they were doing was objecting procedurally to get on the record. They knew there wasn't a chance that there would be some kind of commission to look at the election for 10 days. I mean, think about this, everybody. We spent 2 months looking at the election. What's 10 days going to do at this point? All it's going to do is further delay the certification for Biden. And I'm not happy saying that, but I'm saying it is what it is. The way we could have won these cases, and I'm 100% convinced we could have won, is if we had effective lawyering and we had a cohesive team that had a cohesive message and strategy. We had no ground game and we had no strategy. And we're depending upon Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell to file these actions because all these lawyers ran away from Trump in the end. They were all cancel cultured. A lot of the law firms pulled back because the Lincoln Project doxed them, unfortunately. And they got a lot of pressure from, the other partners in their firms who didn't do election law that they were going to lose business because there's some toxicity to this. So they pulled back. But my point is that if we fought this the right way in the courts, who could have addressed it, then we would have won. But we lost in the courts, and we lost for obvious reasons. And trust me, when this stuff comes out publicly, there's going to be so many books about this stuff. There's going to be so many stories, and it's going to be so transparently obvious and to everyone that, this stuff we could have won. This stuff needed to be proven in the courts, and we lost it in the courts. And if you lose it in the courts, you got nothing else to say. You got nothing else to do. What's your recourse? The state legislatures, they're more of a coward than a Congress. They're not going to do anything. So, it's a part-time job at a legislature. You get paid, whatever. Like they don't care.
Man, let me ask you this. I just want to clarify one thing. as you said, that we could have won, and I want to get to that. But the president had bad lawyers, and the good lawyers, as we heard earlier on, were doxxed by the Lincoln Project, so they pulled back. They too were afraid as to, one, I'll probably lose my job, my family could be attacked, so I'm just going to just step aside. So we're left with Giuliani. Yes, he was at one point a good lawyer. He did bring down like 3 crime families, but as far as the election law, it was like, what was his, knowledge base? And apparently,
I'm sorry, but even before Giuliani, when I was doing, working with volunteers for Trump, guess who was running the legal team? Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those guys are not
Look
lawyers,
at Michael Cohen.
and I don't even think that Corey Lewandowski is a college graduate. I'm not even sure if those guys are college graduates, let alone I know they're not lawyers. How the hell could they have run?
Police officer.
How could they have run a legal team for the president of the United States? And again, it should have been a cohesive message. Like, okay, every state that did this drive-by with mail-in voting, it should have been the same action in every state. Copycat filing. Very easy to do this. There was no management from the top. It was just a smattering of different people. And then when those lawyers ran away from Trump, who we left with? Tinfoil hat.
Right. So
Dominion, Smartmatic, Linwood, Pedo, Epstein, what?
Manny, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're not saying the fraud doesn't exist, just that Trump's legal team did not take the correct avenues to address the cases. And it should have started a long time ago before the election about the mail-in balloting and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Trump, when Trump was at the debate, I think, the second debate, they asked him, if he would accept the results. And he said, of course, unless, there's no fraud and all this stuff. It was so obvious what was going to happen with the mail-in voting. We just let it happen.
Looking towards the future, though, let's just say this election's a scratch. What would you say to people who are like, okay, we might have to take this loss, but how do we fix this in the future? With a Democrat House, Senate, and presidency now, they're just going to double down on mail-in voting and keep all the machines that we've got so many concerns about. What's the path to fix this in the future?
So I think it's a couple of things. One is I think we have to focus on winning the House in 2022. That should be, we should flip the House. It's close. We should focus all energies on flipping the House, and we need to focus on election integrity. And if we can't do it legislatively, then I think we need to do litigation. We need to start being prepared for 2022 now. So let's bring legal actions now, right? Let's start suing now in terms of state actions. If you have crazy mail-in voting in certain states without signature validations or whatever, then bring actions now. What about getting voter ID? What about making sure we get some kind of form of voter ID? Again, if it's not done legislatively, bring actions in courts, but do it now. If we do it in 2022, it's too late. Do you realize when you do, like I ran for office, so I know what's involved in the process, you have to approve the ballot. The candidates have to make sure the name's on the ballot, the ballot's cool. And then they have to print the ballot, and it's bureaucratic because it's the government. This thing could take months to do. So when you have a question about a ballot, or you have a question about how the ballot's mailed, you can't just, arbitrarily, after the ballots are mailed out, question and raise that as a concern. A lot of times it's too late. You got to do this stuff before it goes out, and you have to understand how it's going to be mailed, how it's going to be received, whatever. But you can't start early enough, as far as I'm concerned.
Can I ask a question, Manny?
Yeah, sure.
I don't want to oversimplify, and obviously you're brilliant, and I'm not following all the intricacies, but my overall sense of what you're saying is that basically conservatives kind of got outmaneuvered this time, that the forces that were arrayed against this president teed things up in the various states legally to put us at a disadvantage, and that what we need to do going forward is to try to reverse that legally, these various machinations that were put in place.
Yeah, no, that's well said. I was talking to someone earlier, and there was a question. Was the election legally stolen or illegally stolen? And my answer was it was legally stolen. Right? There were intricacies in each state.
Yeah.
There was a consent decree in Georgia, whatever. Why weren't we on that when that consent decree was entered into? Talking about it now, it's done, and no court is going to overturn what's done because judges just don't do that stuff. So, and every lawyer knows that. So I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying we got outmaneuvered big time. And I think the arrogance, unfortunately, and the hubris and, the Trump kind of point of view, like, yeah, this stuff's going to happen, but I'm going to win so big that I'm going to overcompensate for it. I think that had a lot to do with it. And a lot of people kind of believed that, and there was a lot of noise. And I think at the end of the day, we didn't have the ground game, right? So, for example, in Pennsylvania, when a lot of the ballots, the mail-in ballots came in, envelopes were discarded.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how would you prove a ballot came in on time or late? You have to look at the envelope. Now, a lot of the people who work for the Board of Elections or, worked on election day and around election day, they're retirees, whatever. They're good patriotic people. They're not bad people. And maybe they save every single thing. These people save receipts and that kind of thing. They were probably instructed to discard the envelopes and shred them. But we should have known that, right? And we should have had penetration then and gotten copies of training materials. I'm sure stuff was done by Zoom because of COVID. Where were we? How come we didn't know that these people were going to chuck the envelopes or go to court and say, hey, Your Honors, I want to get an injunction, making sure that these people don't throw those envelopes out. Go to court after the envelopes are thrown out and shredded and saying, Your Honor, hey, look, it's unfair. We're the victims.
Right, and then like recounting at the end, the other side.
We're the victims.
Counting, but it's like the shysting may have taken place earlier in the process. I understand that much. Like,
we're the victims here, Your Honor. We're the president of the United States. We have the full might of the presidency, but we've been victimized because these people threw the envelopes out. We're being laughed at. We should have preemptively said, hey, let's make sure the envelopes are kept, or else. Because in accordance with state law, you need to keep the envelopes 2 years.
But Manny, it goes back to something that I was saying earlier on. When you have, and we're all human beings, and you have people who are saying that we're going to support the president, we're going to do this. But when it started getting really hot and heavy, people started getting doxxed. These were good lawyers with good intentions.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, we're going to step aside. We're not going to do this. I mean, you have to have the balls and be willing to get out there and fight, knowing that people are going to come after you. It's not right. That should not happen.
I agree.
And people, with the administration, the lawyers that he had, they were saying, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But knowing that, hey, there are a lot of good people who were here that are saying, I can't touch this. And Jenna Ellison, I mean, at one point, she wasn't even a Trump fan. And then all at once,
she has no court. She has no court experience. I don't think she's ever brought a case in federal court, and she's leading the effort. And I'm not trying to slight her, but again,
no, understood.
It just proves that people did not want to work with Trump. Number one. Number two, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but a lot of the support and backbone should have came from the president. Where was Trump on defending the lawyers that got doxxed? He's not loyal in a lot of ways. Just to kind of set the record straight. Trump expects loyalty from people, but he's not 100% loyal to other people. So,
explain. What do you mean by that? A lot of people are going to an example.
I think Trump expects loyalty, but he throws people under the bus pretty quickly. And particularly if you disagree with him. And you look at a lot of people that he hired in his administration, and then he winds up firing right away because they have some issue. A president is like a CEO. A president doesn't know everything.
I was going to say, could they be because after he hired him, he realized they weren't very good at their job?
Well, and we got to also realize
that he's a shitty president because he should have done his due diligence. And why did you hire someone to do brain surgery and then after they commit malpractice and kill 10 people, then you fire them? I mean, it can't be both ways.
Right. Well, let me just add this also because we've had other guests on here, and what we also have to realize is that Trump isn't a politician. So a lot of people he put into these positions were based upon referrals. A lot of people made a referral to him. They gave him bad advice, in my opinion.
But not everybody, respectfully, everybody that he in his cabinet would look, all his Secretary of State. I mean, most of the people that he hired, he wound up firing. So that he's a bad manager.
Tillerson. Right, Rex
Tillerson. Yeah. Why do you even pick Rex Tillerson in the first place?
He came as a recommendation from Condoleezza Rice.
Well, I mean, again,
Look at Christopher Wray, a recommendation by Chris Christie. A lot of individuals he picked.
I'm just saying that Trump is not. This is well known, right? The only people that Trump are loyal to have the last name Trump or Jared Kushner.
Right.
Trump's not very loyal to other people, but he expects loyalty from them, and there's no reciprocity. And I think at the end of the day, it's coming back to bite him in the ass, and that's what's going on right now. That people are running for the hills away from Trump after what happened yesterday, and they're done with him. They're done. Any people are livid, pissed off at him.
What do you think the future lies for him with the 74 million?
Well, I thought that he lost the race to Biden, unfortunately. And he would, regroup. He had these 75 million people that he would keep in close contact with and run again in 2024, no doubt. And be the kingmaker and pick the candidate who's going to run in 2024. I think after yesterday, he's done. I think he impacted his legacy. I think a lot of people are upset at him. 5 people died yesterday. It was just embarrassing for me to watch it. I know a lot of people that went down there. I was going to go down, and I'm fortunate, glad I didn't. I think people were misled and got pissed off and angry that they expected something to happen that was never going to happen. And he led with, he is part of that contingent that misrepresented to people and got people all riled up about something that could have never happened. And I blame him and I hold him directly accountable. Not that he incited violence, but look, he's a president of the United States. You think it would be tough for him to find an opinion of whether or not the votes could, be overturned, the electoral college votes could be overturned? No, he got to get an answer in 3 seconds. So I don't know if it was his ego or they were fundraising. I mean, I know they raised $200 million for his legal defense fund. I haven't gotten any emails or texts today, but up until yesterday, I kept getting, 6 to 10 emails and texts from the campaign. They kept fundraising. So, I hold him accountable. I think he crushed his legacy. I think it's going to be difficult for people to support him publicly because they're going to be worried about this toxicity. And I think he lost a lot of credibility, and I don't know how you get it back. And I think he also hurt his family.
Well, I think one of the things you said, and I definitely agree with, as far as people being afraid to be associated with him, because we're hearing that right now, what the media is spinning. I think a company came out, I think it's Shopify, that came out and said that if you're ordering anything that's related to Trump paraphernalia, you're not going to. I mean, and that's just not right. I mean, because now we're saying that he is akin to Hitler and a lot of these other people, whereas that's just not true. Trump did not cause the violence that took place yesterday. But the way the media, because they control so much along with big tech, is going to be, the narrative will be that this is Trump. So
I'm saying we shouldn't even have had any event yesterday. The event was tied to the certification of the electoral votes. Why didn't have the event today? Why didn't have the event on Saturday? What was the significance of the January 6th date? Was this, if Mike Pence does the right thing, everybody knew Mike Pence couldn't do anything but the right thing, which was to uphold the Constitution. Right. That's what Mike Pence did. So anything else was just a fantasy, fiction. So, although I don't blame Trump for inciting the violence, I blame Trump for getting a crowd excited about something that couldn't happen, and then people get pissed off. And I don't know what people did, based upon that. But at the end of the day, I know there's a lot of people that I interact with in social media that are very upset at me because I've been saying this stuff now for 3 months, 2 months, that it was done. Trump lost. We lost in the courts, and it's a done deal. But I'll give you an example of how people are being misled. So I got into like a little Twitter battle with someone, and I said, look, it's a done deal. And they go, well, what do you mean? And I go, well, it's over. And they go, yeah, but it's a violation of the U.S. Constitution that these states allowed for mail-in voting. And I go, no, it's not. It's a violation of the state constitution, not the U.S. Constitution. So I corrected them. Right? Why is that important? Because this person was going for the jugular with the wrong information. So they weren't trying to check the facts and make sure that they were right. They were just going for the kill. So we all have been misled by influencers like Lynn Wood. Like Lynn Wood has 1.1 million Twitter followers,
Mhm.
and it's a problem. It's a big
Mhm.
it's a big problem. It's a big problem, and the fact that people believe this shit is just absolutely preposterous.
But
So
hmm,
Go ahead, Heather.
I was just going to say, Manny, but I hear you. But why do you think that? I mean, if Trump really knew it was totally a done deal and there was no recourse, I don't know. I mean, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but why would he have encouraged people? I mean, I kind of feel like he maybe hoped that somehow something would happen that would maybe sway Pence or persuade enough members of the legislature to come over to his side. I mean, I guess there's no knowing exactly.
I don't know. I mean, it could be his arrogance. I mean, I don't know. But I mean, Trump is a president, and no president has that ability to overturn the election results. So, if the same thing happens to Biden in 24, whatever. I mean, no president has the ability to force their vice president to do what Trump expected Pence to do. So I can't answer that question. It's kind of weird. And I'm seeing some comments. Why am I blaming Trump? Because Trump's the president. Someone's got to get the blame. Who am I going to blame? Pence? Well, no, you know what? I'll blame Barron. I'm going to blame Barron. I mean, why am I blaming Trump? Because he's the boss. He's the man. And he's the big boss. And someone's going to take accountability and responsibility. So if everybody thinks Trump's so awesome, Trump makes mistakes too.
Right.
And he made some big ass mistakes
Mhm.
with this election and a huge mistake yesterday with this event. Huge. And whether or not you agree with me doesn't matter.
Right.
History agrees with me.
Right. So
Okay.
We'll see.
Well, let me say this. As far as having the event yesterday, but had they not reached the White House, the Capitol, do you still think there was a mistake for them to have had the rally?
No, but there's rumor out there that the whole intent of the rally was then to follow up and go to the Capitol. So
Go to the Capitol, but not to breach the walls of the Capitol. I don't think.
Yeah, if people like went to the Capitol and peacefully protested, yes. But you realize how idiotic and pathetic we look when you have like a guy with a Viking hat on.
Yeah, but who was Cal? Like, I don't think Cowman was really part of the movement.
Well, whatever. But the point is no one kind of took him out to say, he's not with us.
Cowman.
Where was the sign to say he's not with us? So the point is the people in Belarus, they're like laughing at us because, these people are like breaking into the glass, pushing through the barricade. It just looks so stupid. Again, what was the intention of going in? Putting Mike Pence in a headlock? Like what was I going to do? Express my my frustration with the government. Oh please, there was fraud. Okay, great. I told them there was fraud. What is Josh Hawley going to do? What's Ted Cruz going to do? There's fraud. The election was stolen. We've been saying that shit for months.
Right. But I think, in my opinion, had the events not taken place, and Hawley and Ted Cruz, have they been able to say, okay, we want this to, for 10 days just to look at election integrity and whatnot, I did not anticipate things to be turned over because, I mean, like you said, Biden's didn't have the power to do it. But I think had they been allowed, because to this point, people are still saying, okay, yeah, you counted the votes over and over again, but you still count the votes that we said that shouldn't have been counted. Had they been able to just investigate, do an investigation, and then say, okay, we did the investigation and we came back with these findings. Unfortunately, does not look good for the president. But I think that had they been allowed to just proceed, and that is what I was hoping for all along, not for the election to be overturned, but so that people would see, okay, this is what we've done, because you have 7 million people who are still saying it wasn't fair. And although right now the media is doing their best to try and put the note in Trump's coffin, and maybe, he had something to do with it, you still have 74 million people who think that this was not fair, and my vote didn't count. Just like we're saying, okay, we can't overturn those votes because they voted. It's not fair to say their votes are inaccurate. But what about the people who voted and said, but my vote now didn't weigh anything?
Right.
You know,
No,
so
I
you have
mean,
these two-
I don't disagree with you, but a fairness argument is a weak argument. That's your weakest argument. It's
But-
not fair. It's not fair. So, you know, again, like we can't in the place that we have to prove what we're alleging, we couldn't prove it 60 times. So
I really liked
What-
your idea, Manny, that you know we should do advance work legally in advance of the next election, not to shiest, but to push back against the shysting that was done allegedly to conservatives. I don't understand all the legalities, but I do have the impression that here in Pennsylvania, where I am, you know, we have an attorney general in the state, Josh Shapiro. I'm not making any specific accusations, but I am saying, you know, this was a guy who was tweeting weeks in advance of the election, Donald Trump will not win here. You know, when every vote is counted, it will not be allowed to happen. I mean, this guy's the AG. He's not a pundit. You know, he's supposed to be overseeing all of this. And a lot of people here in Pennsylvania feel that, you know, he showed his extreme bias. This is one of the people who was in charge. I don't know all the details, but I know that there were some legal cases in advance here in Pennsylvania that related to which votes, which late arriving ballots could be counted. It seems as if things were set up in advance to favor the Democrats. And so I wonder.
yeah, I don't know if that's true. I know that there was a Supreme Court case, and Alito said that the ballots that come in late should be pushed to the side and not counted, and it would have to go back to the Supreme Court to actually include those votes potentially. I'm talking about just mail-in voting to begin with, right? That there should have been legal efforts way early on that, which weren't done. You know, they were done. It was done later. There was someone, I forget his name. He ran for Congress. He's a decorated veteran. He brought a case with a congressman about mail-in voting, and he lost. It was too late.
Well, look, I don't claim any, I mean, the legalities get very complex, but my overall sense is, where I do agree with my hardcore patriots here, is that I have the overall sense that there was a lot of advance work done by the Democrats in they did a lot of manipulating and maneuvering in advance of this election. And while I don't know, I personally feel like I don't know who won in terms of the electoral colleges. I don't have a hard time believing that plenty of attorneys general and governors and judges who hated this president would have done everything they could in advance to try to influence the outcome. And so I'm interested in how we can, as conservatives, push back legally and fairly against that, what we can do in advance to try to prevent that kind of maneuvering and manipulating on the margins. Because I definitely think there were some improprieties here in Pennsylvania for sure. And I think the whole idea of addressing it in advance, thinking ahead for next time, is a good one.
Yeah, no, look, I don't disagree. When I was younger, I used to play a lot of sports, and I hated losing, and I never admitted losing. I would always just say that people cheated, and that's why you won. I could politicize everything, right? I could say Trump has been so effective in politicizing everything that the world is against him, the weather is against him, professional sports is against him, judges are against him.
Is against him.
I think they are. I think
a lot of it is bullshit. Okay, a lot of it is bullshit. You had judges. How then does a judge nominated by Trump rule against him if that's the case?
Good point.
That blows up in his face. A lot of judges who embarrassed, a lot of the lawyers on his cases. Sean Parnell. Sean Parnell brought a case I couldn't remember his name, but about universal mail-in voting, but it was brought late. But a lot of these judges were Republicans, and that, so we're so into this kind of what I call the excuse factory. It's like, oh, but those Republican judges, they're rhinos. Okay,
Well,
they're Democratic judges, but what about the judges that supported, were nominated by Trump?
well, that is a compelling point. But however, I think that folks aren't wrong in perceiving this to be probably the most embattled president in modern history in terms of the big institutions, the media.
But he should have brought. So this is an analogy I tell people, right? So say we all live where we live, and there's a rough neighborhood where we live, right? And people get mugged walking down that neighborhood. Okay, so you're thinking, should I walk down that neighborhood? Should I walk down that street, or should I kind of walk down another street? Right? You're like, you know what? I'm going to walk down that street, and I'm going to have 20s hanging out of my pocket. Okay? And you get mugged, right? Which is kind of expected. Or, maybe you bring some people with you, and people try to mug you, and you're able to fend them off. Or, you live in a state like Florida, you can have a gun, and you can defend yourself. Why is anything that we're talking about surprising to a president who's been talking about people coming after him from 2015? He was not prepared to fight it off. You can't bring a knife to a gunfight. So I'm not giving him an out saying it's unfair, these judges, it's unfair. Well, you should have been prepared for that. You should have said, oh shit, you know what? This is a Democratic judge. This judge is going to rule against me. I'm going to bring that action in a different court. Or whatever. Be prepared for the fight. Again, stop crying a victim. It's not going to get you anywhere. Not with me anyway.
Right. No, I think you make a valid point. But I would also say, as far as the judges, simply because they were a Democrat judge or Republican judge, I wasn't expecting them to rule on his behalf simply because he picked them. But one of the things I will say is that, and it will always be in the back of my mind, and I think a lot of others, is that some of these judges probably took a step back out of fear that a mob mentality that someone would be outside their house. These are all human beings, and they have families.
Maybe, and then that's where Attorney General Barr should have stepped up and said, "Look, the rule of law in this country. I'm going to defend these judges, but he didn't do the right thing.
Right,
he didn't do the right thing. There was no support for judges. No support. I mean, why are we? Think about this. Everything we've been talking about are all civil cases, right? If we're talking about fraud, and we're talking about dead people voting, and we're talking about a lot of illegality. It's criminal, right? Where are the criminal authorities? Where's the FBI? Where's Ray? Where was Barr? There is no widespread fraud. What does that mean? Right. That there's fraud, but there's not enough of it? It's small spread fraud? I mean, what the hell does that mean?
I think these people were, I honestly believe that these people were afraid.
They have the authority, just to let everybody know.
Yeah, they have the authority, but look,
criminal authorities could have done the investigations, could have issued subpoenas, could have done investigatory work. They have the resources, not Trump's lawyers.
Yeah,
I mean, bringing a civil case as opposed to a criminal case. The criminal authorities had the ability. They refused to do anything. Attorney General Barr, FBI, U.S. attorneys, they've done nothing. Why did they refuse?
Were they afraid? Were they afraid or they didn't like Trump? Because either of those answers is not, is
Trump could have had. I mean, there's no reason why Trump could have not persuaded Barr to nominate a special prosecutor to look into the election. I was urging that from the start. Right. I wanted that even for Hunter Biden because Joe Biden can't fire a special prosecutor because that's obstruction and he could be impeached. Right. So I wanted.
Wait! You said he could be impeached? Who's going to impeach him?
If we take over the House in 2022, the Republicans will.
Okay, Andrew, do you have another question? This has been a really good conversation. I want to thank you, Manny, for coming on. We always
sorry I was late. Yeah, sorry I was late.
We always look forward to your legalese, your insight, and Heather. Of course, we look forward to you coming on. Being the the other opposition to what Andrew and I say, and it makes it a well-rounded conversation because we can agree to disagree on the different topics.
Sometimes we agree. Yes.
Right, sometimes we agree. I think we agree more than not, but this is what should be happening in the public.
Exactly. We need to kind of listen to each other and talk stuff
Right,
out.
and that's the reason why we wanted you on, so that we could, had I known you were going to say some of the things, I probably would have silenced you. No, just kidding. No, but we really
You would have muted me, right?
Yeah,
You would have.
no, we really enjoyed your take on things, and really appreciate you jumping off one show and coming on tonight, because we
good to see you again, Manny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, Andrew, I know that you had a question. We've got to close pretty soon, but did you have another question that you wanted to throw out there before we leave?
Actually, when I put that in the chat, I have asked the question since then.
Okay, good. Well, again, thank you guys for tuning in tonight to listen to different sides. I thank Attorney Alicandro for coming on and departing to us his knowledge as to what was happening, that he did work, volunteered on the Trump team. So that's really good to know, having firsthand information. Hey, this is the way it is. A new day, a new dawn is upon us. We have a new president-elect. We wish him well. It will be interesting, but definitely tune in to megamedia.org, because we will always be there to dissect the going-ons of the next administration. So.
Yes, and Manny and I actually had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about how a lot of people in our movement are just saying what you want to hear instead of what's actually factual or the truth. So just watch things on play and try and make up your own mind in your head. And
yeah, that's great advice. And one of
your own opinions.
100% right. And everybody's smart enough to do that. And one of the judges said in one of Sidney Powell's cases, just because you say it so doesn't make it so.
Right.
And I think we've experienced a lot of that. A lot of people passionately saying things that people believe.
Right. So, okay. Well, thank you guys. Heather, were you about to say something?
I like the general idea of doing more to outfox them legally, fairly. I think conservatives, maybe I'm romanticizing a bit, but I think we tend to be more invested in being very straightforward and by the book and honest to a fault. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be, but I think that I personally think there was a lot of deviousness and underhanded maneuverings that happened in various states. And it was all very, very hard to prove after the fact. And that is what I take from what Manny's saying. I didn't follow every intricacy, but I think that to the extent there was some fraud and impropriety, I think we got outfoxed. And I think that if there are ways to legally try to push back, that sounds real good.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you guys. Thank you all for joining us. Thank our viewers and our listeners. Please tune in again. We'll be back on for another live show Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. God bless, be safe, and we look forward to a new day arising. Thank you. And